Hi guys, welcome back. We are working today on a 2004 XC90, and as will eventually happen with all of them, the intercooler has sprung a leak both at the top and the bottom. Now there are three radiators here. The front one is for the aircon, you can see the filler port there. The middle one is the intercooler, and that's the one we'll be addressing today, and the back one is the one with the fan cowl attached onto it that's full of coolant and weighs quite a lot. Intercoolers are a fairly common thing to go wrong on these cars. There are a couple of videos on YouTube that really make a meal out of this process. It is not as difficult as you've been shown. This is the easy way to do it, so stick around. This won't be a long video, but it will be fairly useful for anyone that needs to tackle this job. Now, I think the easiest way to start is to actually show you what the intercooler looks like, and it's really a very simple component. It's a radiator through which exhaust gas flows, and that exhaust gas is cooled down to ambient temperature before it's fed into your turbo to spin the turbo and give your engine a bit more power. Now what we've got here on this particular Volvo is a leak here and a leak here. It's also warped, which is very common for a higher mileage D5 particularly. And really this radiator is all that needs to be replaced now, and your auto factor should take this into consideration. But if you're running anything pre-2003, your MAP sensor, that's the manifold absolute pressure sensor, is going to be on the top of the rocker box cover, right on the top of the engine near the injectors and the oil filler spout. Dead easy to spot. If you have a later model, the MAP sensor goes here. So when they ask you if you want one with the MAP sensor hole or not, it depends on whether your MAP sensor is on the top of the engine or on the end of the intercooler where it feeds back into the engine. In this case, I do need the MAP sensor just there, and I've got a video showing you how to change that out just in case you're interested. I shall link that above, just up here. Interestingly, with this aftermarket radiator, it does come with a cap to plug that hole if you don't need it, just FYI. So you can definitely use this for the type with the MAP sensor on top of the engine, but you couldn't use it the other way around. If you got one without this hole here and you need it, you're stuffed. The engine management system won't operate correctly. Now, as you can see, there are bolts that run through this, two here, two on the other side, and that really is it. So other than the bolts that basically clamp the aircon radiator onto the front and the coolant radiator onto the back in what the manuals call the radiator pack, basically other than that, that's the only difficult thing about this job is getting at it. Now there are a few videos on YouTube that make a real meal of this and kind of start taking apart the whole of the top of the engine, take the slam panel off and all the rest of it. You don't need to do that. That is an absolute nightmare. You're going to introduce all sorts of problems with sensors, with bonnet sensors, with your catch, with the cable that releases the bonnet, all that nonsense. You just don't need to do it. We're going to attack this from underneath, and interestingly, that's actually advocated by the Haynes manual, which not a lot of people seem to look at these days, but anyway, I swear by them. The Haynes manual suggests dropping the whole radiator pack down underneath, and in order to do that we need to remove the air deflector. So that in itself is going to be the first thing we need to do with this job. So I'm going to get it up on axle stands. Safety first, make sure anytime you're going under the vehicle that it can't fall down on you. We're not going to be taking the wheels off, so that's additional safety there, but it's helpful to have a bit of extra clearance underneath the vehicle. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is get this off. This air deflector here is right in the way, and with that out the way we'll be able to just drop everything straight down. So under here, that's the deflector piece there that needs to come off. You can see the oil kind of creeping down that. Looking here at the back of the water radiator, and again we've got oil blowing through from the intercooler behind it. So that's the coolant radiator we're looking at there. But the oil leak is one of the main symptoms. It's just greasy oil coming out of the exhaust, condensing in the intercooler, but also clouds of black smoke and a lack of power basically because the boost pressure that should be going into the turbo to spin it up is actually blowing oil and other assorted crud through the other radiators, through holes in the intercooler. Anyway, back to the deflector. So this piece needs to come off, and if we follow it to the end, you can see that there are a number of bolts, a couple of obvious ones and one hidden one. So 1, 2, 1 up through this hole here, that one there. So then with those bolts out, what's going to happen is that this bit, which is kind of hooked over, you can just see there, it hooks over the back. We need to push it up and forwards, and then that'll drop down. So that's how the thing is held in place. On top of this, there's like a little arm that just reaches in and hooks over, and then the bolts hold it in place. So those bolts out on both sides, and then we just raise this up, give it a bonk that way with a rubber mallet or a dead blow, and it'll just fall off. These are 14 mils, and whilst I'm whizzing them off today with an impact driver, you absolutely can do this with hand tools. Okay, so you can see now that that is loose. I'm just leaning on the front there. Now support it when you lift it and give it a whack, otherwise it's going to fall on you and crush you. It is a fairly heavy piece. It's not massively heavy, it's not going to break a rib or anything, but yeah, just be careful when you do this. Slightly easier to see what's going on the other side, but as I lift this up, you see it just comes forwards like that. And that there is where the hidden bolt locates into. So just unhook that on both sides. I'm currently supporting this, so I'm going to need to put the camera down to do the other side. But yeah, it just pulls up and forwards. Just a side note on removal, there are some little trim clips in the corners of this section of bumper. It depends which version of the styling you have. It can be useful to just pop those out. They are just little plastic trim clips, as I say, so just pop them out and that'll give you a good bit more manoeuvrability around this to be able to push the thing forwards and then drop it back out. And here it is. And just to show you again, those little bits that hook over the top of the front of the subframe. Now I'm going to have to take this outside and clean it up. Got to be careful with the oil that's going to come off this, but you can see the kind of mess that these intercoolers make when they start leaking. So if you have an unexpected loss of power, loads of black smoke and a shed load of oil pouring out, oftentimes in the wheel arches you can see it kind of runs down this air deflector and off down the arm, so it can look like it's coming out somewhere around the timing belt cover or whatever. It's not. This is a really common problem with these cars. Now looking down at it from the top, following around from the front of the engine, this pipe here is the one that leads down all the way down here where my finger is, and that thing with the yellow wires there is the manifold absolute pressure sensor, the MAP sensor. So that is one side of the intercooler, and on the other side you can see the same thing again. Now you'll notice that the Jubilee clip for this is in a really stupid position, so I'm going to have to use some angled long nose pliers to get that out. You might be lucky, I don't know, but you absolutely don't need to start disassembling the top of the engine, taking all this slam panel off and all the rest of it. Leave that well alone, take it out through the bottom. Now in the XC90, unlike V70s, S60s and so on, there's plenty of clearance space for this whole unit to drop down. So we just need to be a little bit careful about other things that are still attached, these wires and clips and so on, and it'll probably be useful to remove the air intake cowl to see what's going on there. But one other word of advice for you is disconnect the negative terminal of your battery before you touch anything like this, because that is a fairly powerful fan and you don't want it spinning up on you and taking your fingers off when you least expect it. Right, so just a quick reminder of what the unit looks like. This is the top, that's the bottom, that's the left hand side, that's the right hand side. So it basically sits in the vehicle like that. We have at the bottom of the left hand side and at the top of the left hand side a bolt that runs through. On the right hand side we've got a bolt at the bottom, and 2/3 of the way up is another one. We've got the map sensor to think about, and we've got just 2 Jubilee clips that hold the pipes on there. So I'll show you where those bolts are on the car. Not the most elegant job in the world, but it'll do. Basically just a piece of wood underneath the radiator, propped up so that when everything else drops down, it will still be supported. Okay, so starting at the top, I'm going to do this one first. Helps to have a long extension bar for this one. That one just pulls out. There it is, put it in a safe place. Okay, a medium-sized one for the next one. This is on the right-hand side of the vehicle. So just above that hose connector, about 2/3 of the way up. I should say these are all 10mm bolts, by the way. There's the next one, again, safe place. Okay, so we're now under the front left-hand corner. Super short extension bar makes this one a little bit easier. Go. Remember this bolt here as well, by the way. So this bolt clamps the front 2 radiators, or technically it clamps the front radiator. That's the one for the coolant, the aircon, and the intercooler is sitting on top of that bracket. So we'll come to that in a minute. That's one of the last ones to take off. I'm just going to go and remove the last bolt that holds the 3 radiators in the pack together on the other side. That one is over there. Now for this last one, you can see the end of it just up there. I'm not actually using an extension bar at all, I'm just using a deep socket. And as I mentioned before, it's kind of tucked in and over the top. So try and find you an angle that shows you what's going on. There you go. Okay, and I'll pull that one out in a sec. So that's the 4 bolts out, now the Jubilee clips. Now there is one little trick that's quite nice with Volvos, and that is, with XC90s anyway, you just pull these 2 clips out the back of the headlight, and then the whole thing kind of comes forward and lifts out. Now I can get at the end of that Jubilee clip with a normal screwdriver through here, so that makes life just a little bit easier. And I'll just pop the headlight back in just to keep it safe. And of course the one on the other side. Now they are 7mm, so a little 7mm offset spanner like this one will get the job done. Just take your time, there's no rush. I mean, what are we talking about? 4 bolts to hold the radiators together, 2 bolts to hold the bracket at the bottom, 2 Jubilee clips, and of course the 6 14mm bolts that we had to remove to get the air deflector off the bottom. This isn't a mad complicated job. There we go. Right, so those tubes will just pull off there. Let's get underneath and take the bracket off. Okay, so I've got the Jubilee clips loosened off now. Just need to press this little tab thing on the front and then pull the sensor wire off. That just presses down to release. And with those pipes popped off, we're now ready to drop the intercooler radiator at the bottom. With all that loosened off, you should then be able to just pop that pipe off the end there. Sensor's loose, so that side's good to go. Same on the other side, just pop that off and then we'll go back down to the bottom and release that bracket. Okay, so everything's now loosened off from the top. The intercooler is free to move, but basically held in place by this retaining bracket that clamps the aircon stuff on the front end. I'm going to just get this off here because of access restrictions because of that pipe. It's going to use a 10mm offset spanner. I'll just do this off camera because it'll take a couple of minutes. Okay, so we've got the same bracket on the other side. This just bolts onto the front of the coolant radiator. I'm just going to completely remove this again, just using a 10mm offset spanner. This is really where they come into their own, getting into these awkward little corners. Again, because of these pipes, we're a little bit limited on what tools you can use to speed things up. So good old-fashioned 10mm offset spanner, a very valuable addition to any tool set. Right, so last few turns of that out, and this will fall down. Still connected on the other end by some rubber pipes, but we'll just gently lay that down. Right, so the last two bolts are 10mm. They're in from the top. Another one over here. And then the last two big bolts we have to deal with for the radiator are this one and the same on the other side. Alright, super long extension bar required for this one. The bolt itself, at least on this vehicle, is a 12mm. I'm not firing this off with the impact driver because I want to do this slowly enough to be able to figure out if something is going wrong before it goes wrong. Okay, there's the bolt, they're quite long. And you can see there how it connects. So that whole unit now pushes over. I mentioned this scoop earlier on. It's just two 10mm, one on either side. The issue with this is basically that it kind of stops the radiator moving too much backwards. So we just need to remove this. It just it's a square section that goes into the bottom of the airbox. But as far as the top of the engine goes, that is it. That's probably all we need to remove. Now I need to change the coolant anyway, so I'm choosing basically to make my life easier, and this pipe here where the coolant pipe return comes over the subframe assembly there on the right hand side of the screen, this bit. If you move this pipe out of the way, it'll make it just a little bit easier to drop everything down. and we need to drop the pack down to kind of lift the intercooler out to the front. So this is a convenience for myself really. I need to change the coolant anyway. It's been a few years since that was done, so I'm just popping this one off here. Expect a gush. There's a lot of coolant in this engine, of course. Safety first, make sure you don't get any of this in your mouth or your eyes, and make sure you wash your hands very carefully after handling. Okay, so I'm underneath the car here from the left-hand corner, just looking at the back of the radiator. That is where the coolant pipe went in, and that's where I've drained all the coolant out of the system from. This here is an oil return, I believe. Has a little like clip thing here, if you can see that, with ears on it. You'll see these green bits sticking out of the pipe. I'll show you that later on. There is another one of them up top, just there. Okay, right in the middle of the screen there, that's what they look like when the pipe's in place. You press those green ears, and this is what they look like when they're unplugged. Now, full disclosure, I pulled that one out because of tension on the radiator. That goes into here, and I pulled the coolant pipe off again up there. That goes onto here. Those two pipes basically prevent you from dropping the radiator down, but as you can see, I have now dropped the radiator down. Now, one other little tip for you is that as you drop the radiator down, the cable that clips onto the top of the aircon condenser can get a bit tight, because it's actually clipped onto the top of the arm on the main coolant radiator on the right hand side of the vehicle. So it's sometimes helpful to pop the headlamp out and just release that sensor wire from the top of that until the radiator's reinstalled later. Slightly awkward and a lot of finagling to get these in, but I'm just going to push the aircon radiator up, push the coolant radiator back, and just in this corner here, it's going to pull this plastic forward, and that will allow me to basically pop the intercooler out and down. I'm going to now do the same on the other side. And there it is. So there you go, guys, that's how you do it. The old unit is off, the new unit is waiting in the wings ready to go on. Last job is to get the map sensor off here, little Torx T10, just pop that out, stick it into the new one, and then these pipes go back through that gap there before being pushed up with the coolant radiator. This is a hell of a lot easier to do once you've got this thing out than it is if you try and do this in situ. That's a real tricky little thing to get at, but the manifold absolute pressure sensor just pulls out, little screw, whap it back in, job's a good one. Pro tip for you on the reinstall is that if you're working on your own, just get a trolley jack, support your piece of wood in the middle, and really gently raise it back up. Don't try and force it, just wiggle it from side to side, rock it as it goes. Super quick way of getting stuff back up, but really don't force it. You could do a lot of damage by pushing too hard. Just looking at the unit that's come out here, you can see why it's made such a mess. Basically, at the bottom of the aircon radiator in particular, and you can see also around the bottom of the coolant radiator, it's popped here, and here. Those are, and here as well, they're wet spots, and all the way across the bottom. So if you are experiencing the symptoms of a loss of power or big clouds of black smoke whenever you boot it, or unexpected oil leaks as in this case, this could well be your issue. So just have a look in the front of your engine. If you just kind of peep on down here, you'll see that kind of mess, which is a dead giveaway. Also on the wind deflector underneath, it's very, very obvious when you end up with oil like this running down, although not necessarily obvious where it's coming from, so just always bear this in mind as a possibility. The new unit is freely available, not particularly expensive, about 150 quid, something like that, plus the VAT. Just remember that little wrinkle about the manifold absolute pressure sensor. And just as point of note, whilst I'm here, if you've got an earlier model, it'll be there. So that's it. There you go, guys. Right, I'm going to call it there. Thank you very much for watching. If that's been useful, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.